I'm about to say a sentence I never thought I would say. The Indiana Hoosiers are national champions in football. Curt Cignetti has pulled off one of the greatest turnarounds and coaching jobs in sports history. Just straight out of a Disney movie. But why is that? Why is what Cignetti did so impressive and what makes it so great? Well, I'll tell you why. Because he did it at the losingest program in college football history. Indiana football was a program that was defined by instability, low expectations, and very rare moments of glory. It was known to be one of the hardest places to win in college football. And today we're going to break down the entire history of Indiana football before Curt Cignetti arrived and see just how depressing it was for Hoosier Nation. The only seasons of actual significance for a very long time were 1945 and 1967. In 1945, the Hoosiers went 9-0-1. It was Bo McMillan's 12th season in Bloomington as the head coach, where he had compiled a very average overall record. They won the Big Ten but couldn't win the national championship because they tied with Northwestern 7-7. But they would not have been good enough to win the national championship regardless. Number 1 Army beat number 2 Navy 32-13 to clinch the national championship. The military must have been fired up after beating the Axis powers. And then in 1967, they went 9-2. It was John Ponte's 3rd season as the head coach, where he went 2-8 his first year and 1-8-1 in his second year. The Hoosiers were an undersized team, but they were a speedy team who found ways to win close games. They were nicknamed the Cardiac Kids because of all the close games they won. 7 out of 9 of their wins were by 1 possession. After starting 8-0, they went into Minnesota and got destroyed 33-7, but they defeated number 3 Purdue 19-14 to win the Big Ten. And winning the Big Ten meant Indiana got to go to the Rose Bowl and face number 1 USC and O.J. Simpson. Indiana lost 14-3, but honestly played a lot better than everybody expected. They were severely out-talented and outsized, but only managed to lose by 11. Indiana tried to shut down O.J., but it just wasn't enough. He ran for 128 yards, and this would be Indiana's last Rose Bowl appearance and Big Ten title for a very long time. After 1967, Ponte only had 1 more winning season. His final record at Indiana was 31-51-1. He actually wasn't technically fired. He just decided it was time to leave, and he went to Northwestern. After Ponte left, Indiana hired the man, the myth, the legend himself, Lee Corso. And this was going to be a tough job for Corso. In the 1970s, Indiana was known as an impossible job to win at. And the main reason for that is because the athletic department and the donors prioritized basketball heavily over football. Because when Corso arrived at Indiana, this guy was the head coach of the basketball program. Indiana gave Coach Knight and the basketball program essentially whatever they needed, and it paid off. Just look at all the banners in Assembly Hall. But Corso and the football program suffered heavily from this because the other teams in the Big Ten, they were prioritizing football, and a lot of Big Ten programs were already established. Indiana was at the bottom of the barrel in the Big Ten when it came to facilities, recruiting budget, fan support, and just overall culture. When Corso arrived, Indiana only had 3 winning seasons in 25 years. Just a terrible time for the program. Indiana was completely outmanned, outsized, and out-talented in Corso's early days. His first 3 seasons from 1973 to 1975, he went 5-27-1. But things started to pick up later on. Corso began to win some unexpected recruiting battles in the mid to late 70s, and the offense took a big step forward. From 1976 to 1978, Corso led the Hoosiers to a 14-18-1 record. Not great, but certainly an improvement and pretty solid for Indiana standards. And a quick funny story from the 1976 season. Apparently, the entire Indiana team posed for a picture beside the scoreboard when Indiana took a 7-6 lead over Ohio State. And they ended up losing 47-7. Corso's greatest season came in 1979, where he led Indiana to an 8-4 season and its first ever bowl win in program history. Yes, it took them that long to win a bowl game. Indiana upset BYU in the Holiday Bowl in an all-time classic. Corso remained in Bloomington for 3 more seasons before he was fired. After the 1979 season, he went 14-19 from 1980 to 1982. Corso definitely left the program better than he found it, but the Indiana administration believed it was time for a change. After Corso was let go, Indiana hired Sam Wyche from the San Francisco 49ers coaching staff, but after his first season where he posted a 3-8 record, he left to take the head coaching job at the Cincinnati Bengals. Indiana hired Bill Mallory from Northern Illinois to replace Wyche, and in his first season, the Hoosiers went 0-11. But this was a complete reset and rebuild for Indiana. Corso's roster was built on high-flying offense, and Mallory wanted his team and roster to be built on tough defense and physicality. And slowly but surely, Mallory turned the Indiana football program into the most serious and consistent state it has ever been in. He was brutally honest with himself about the job. He knew Indiana couldn't compete against the Ohio States and the Michigans of the conference consistently, but he could make Indiana the best Indiana could be, if that makes sense. Mallory targeted underrated, overlooked Midwestern and in-state recruits that he believed had potential. And in terms of scheme and philosophy, his number one priority was the line of scrimmage. Mallory believed it was impossible to have the most talented roster, but possible to have the toughest roster. And the results of the process began to show. Before you knew it, Indiana was not the worst program in the Big Ten. From 1986 to 1993, Indiana went 53-38-3 while going to 6 bowl games and winning 2 of them. However, when the mid-90s rolled around, the powerhouse programs began to nationalize recruiting, meaning the local in-state and Midwestern gems that Mallory was able to steal was pretty much no longer an option. The team struggled from 1994 to 1996, and with a combined record of 11-22, Mallory was fired. He left Indiana as the winningest coach in program history. After Mallory was fired in 1996, Indiana was about to enter an extremely long stretch of very bad football. Cam Cameron was hired in 1997, and he just was not the guy for the job. He was an NFL-style coach, a tactician, and Indiana did not need that at the moment. In fact, an NFL-style X's and O's heavy coach is never the guy for the job at Indiana. They needed a culture builder and a guy whose biggest priority was the recruiting trail and the overall management of the program. And that's not a knock on Cameron, that just was not his style of coaching. The lack of resources and the state of the program when he arrived did not help him either. From 1997 to 2001, Cameron compiled an 18-37 record, and he was fired after 2001. Jerry DiNardo was his replacement, hired in 2002. DiNardo had SEC head coaching experience, Vanderbilt from 1991 to 1994, and LSU from 1995 to 1999. DiNardo had a pretty good track record as a recruiter, but that's about all he was good at this point in his career. The game had passed him, his offensive scheme was extremely outdated and predictable. Recruiting improved a little bit, but not enough to have a competitive roster in the Big Ten, and after 2004, DiNardo was fired. His final record was 8-27. At this point, Indiana was probably in its worst state ever. This is what the Indiana program looked like from 1993 to 2004. Just an absolute dump. Terry Hepner was the next Indiana coach, and this is one of the biggest what-ifs in Indiana football history. In 2 seasons, Hepner had the program moving in an actual positive direction for the first time in God knows how long. Hepner installed the spread offense at a time where that was rare in the Big Ten. Indiana started winning some games, and in 2 seasons, Hepner had a 9-14 record, which was not bad considering how horrific of a state the program was in at the time. But after his first season, Hepner was diagnosed with a brain tumor. He still coached his second season, but afterwards the cancer progressed and Coach Hepner passed away in 2007. Just absolutely devastating. Offensive coordinator Bill Lynch took over as head coach after Hepner's passing. In 2007, Lynch led Indiana to a bowl game for the first time since 1993. They fell short to Oklahoma State in the Insight Bowl, but the program was showing some promise. In 2008, Indiana was the victim of a plague of injuries. 13 starters were injured throughout the season. A banged-up Hoosiers team finished 3-9, but Lynch was able to pull in a pretty solid recruiting class. The 2009 team was actually pretty good on the field, but they could not finish games when they had the lead. Indiana choked in the fourth quarter against Michigan, Northwestern, and Wisconsin. Because of this, Indiana finished 4-8. Patience was running low on Lynch. 2010 was a similar story of not being able to finish in the fourth quarter. The Hoosiers lost 3 one-possession games and had 83 points hung up on them by Wisconsin. Finishing 5-7 and 19-30 overall, Lynch was fired. Indiana hired Kevin Wilson, Oklahoma's offensive coordinator, for 8 years. His first season in a complete rebuild, Indiana went 1-11. The offense improved the next season, but the defense was absolutely atrocious. Indiana finished 4-8 and gave up 35 points per game. And the defense didn't improve the next 2 years either. In 2013, they went 5-7, and in 2014, they went 4-8. An average Big Ten offense could easily score 30+ against Indiana. In 2015, Indiana was actually one of the best offensive teams in the country, but the defense was still terrible, finishing 6-6 and losing 4 high-scoring one-possession games. If Indiana had an ounce of a defense under Wilson, they could have actually competed for a Big Ten title. The Hoosiers went to a bowl game for the first time since 2007, the Pinstripe Bowl against Duke, and it basically summed up the entire season and the entire Wilson era. A 44-41 loss. High-scoring offense and a Swiss cheese defense. The defense actually improved in 2016 under first-year defensive coordinator Tom Allen, but the offense took a step back. Indiana finished 6-6, but little did we know, there was some sketchy stuff going on behind the scenes. An investigation was conducted after multiple complaints from players and parents on how Wilson treated his players, especially injured ones. Long story short, the guy was just a jackass. It was a very toxic culture, and even though Indiana made 2 bowl games in a row with him as the head coach, Indiana fired him. Tom Allen was the final Indiana head coach of the Hoosier dark days. He was given the job after the defense improved drastically in 2016, his first year as defensive coordinator. 2017, his first year as head coach, was a complete cultural reset. Indiana went 5-7 with close losses to Michigan, Michigan State, Maryland, and Purdue. 2018 was pretty much a rinse and repeat, but in 2019, he brought the Hoosiers to a bowl game, but once again, they lost. Indiana has not won a bowl game since 1991. They are 0-4 in bowl games since then. The COVID season in 2020 was Allen's last respectable season, as he went 6-2 in a really funky COVID Big Ten, but once again lost a bowl game. 2021 to 2023 was a complete disaster for Allen. Coaching staff turnovers hurt, the defensive identity was gone, the offense was non-existent, and the program was being left behind by everyone else in the conference. Allen could not adapt quickly enough to the transfer portal and NIL, going a combined 9-27 his last 3 years. He was fired. And little did Indiana know, they were about to be the biggest story in all of sports. After decades of losing and being a program roaming in the wilderness for basically its entire existence, Indiana made the greatest hire in Hoosier football history on November 30th, 2023 by hiring Curt Cignetti, and the rest is history.
Got to get to the 8. He's going to take off and run. Mendoza weaves his way first and go diving toward the end zone. Touchdown! Beck steps up, delivers downfield. Intercepted! Jamari Sharp makes the pick that will clinch Indiana's first national championship.